The Sunday school lessons for November the 9th, 2025 are Jerusalem's fall and we've fallen and we can't get up. 2 Kings chapter 24 verses 18 through 20 and 2 Kings chapter 25 verses 1 through 9. Welcome, viewers and subscribers to my channel, Read With Me. I am Audrey. If you are new here, please know that this is an audio reading of the lesson with intermittent commentary. Verses 18 through 20. Verse 18. Zedekiah was 21 years old when he became king, and he reigned in Jerusalem 11 years. His mother's name was Hamutal, daughter of Jeremiah. She was from Libnah. The four kings who reigned over the final days of Judah were all very young by today's standards when ascending to the throne. Jehoahaz, 23, Jehoiakim, 25, Jehoiachim, 18, and Zedekiah, 21. Some modern studies have proposed that the human brain does not fully mature until about age 25. Thus, impulse control is often lower until that point of development. We may be tempted to blame the sins of the kings on the impulsiveness of youth. After all, it was a preference for the advice of young men over that of elders that had led to the division of Israel's monarchy centuries before. But lest we be too hasty in that regard, we remind ourselves that King Josiah, one of Judah's godliest rulers, was only 8 years old when he became king. He began to seek God by age 16, and in the 12th year of his reign at age 20, he began to purge Judah and Jerusalem of their idolatry. Hamutal was the mother of Jehoahaz and of Zedekiah. This Jeremiah from Libnah is not the same man as the more familiar prophet Jeremiah, who was from Anathoth. Verse 19. He did evil in the eyes of the Lord, just as Jehoiakim had done. The disheartening evaluations of having done evil or being wicked in the eyes of the Lord occurs about 50 times in the Old Testament. The vast majority of those instances occur in 1st through 2nd Kings and 1st through 2nd Chronicles. By contrast, the evaluation of having done right in the eyes of the Lord occurs less than half as often. King Josiah having been the last to be acknowledged in that manner. For Zedekiah to conduct himself in evil ways carries a certain sad but pointed irony. His very name means the Lord is righteous. The irony intensifies as we see that his name was imposed on him by a pagan king. The scope of Zedekiah's sin is revealed in the phrase, just as Jehoiakim had done. Similar copycat behavior is attributed to Jehoiakim himself, as well as Jehoahaz and Jehoiachim. The expression, just as his predecessors had done, repeated in 2 Kings, suggests not merely passive tolerance of evil, but active promotion of it. On Zedekiah's reign, personality, fate, and interactions with the prophet Jeremiah. See Jeremiah 21, 1 through 7, etc. Verse 20. It was because of the Lord's anger that all this happened to Jerusalem and Judah, and in the end, he thrust them from his presence. Now Zedekiah rebelled against the king of Babylon. Historians often point to political and military causes for Judah's ruin. When the people of Israel in the north seceded from the United Kingdom under Jeroboam, Solomon's son Rehoboam was left only the small territories of Judah and Benjamin in the south. This little kingdom sat between two regions of great power, Egypt to the west and Mesopotamia to the east. Great empires sought to subdue Israel on their way to conquering other great kingdoms. Seen through this lens of relative military and political power, the kings of Israel and Judah did their best to navigate those treacherous waters by means of treaties to play one power off against another. But the biblical authors do not see the falls of the northern and southern kingdoms as inevitable results of rebellion against superior military powers. Instead, they attribute these falls to the Lord's anger. When God defends his people, they need no human allies. When he withdraws his protection, then comes their defeat. God's anger is not selfish or petulant, as human anger often is. Rather, God's anger is a reaction to rebellion and idolatry. God's covenant with Israel had conditions for Israel to meet. Failure to meet those conditions would result in promised consequences. For the residents of Judah, it is their violation of the covenant that results in God's wrath. Now we learn the specific action that triggers Judah's ultimate exile. The book of Jeremiah records straightforward talks between king and prophet. Jeremiah warned of the coming exile, but the king chose to be persuaded by influential advisors and false prophets. They claimed that Judah could escape Babylon's control by aligning with Egypt. Rebellion had already been tried against Babylon a few years earlier, and it had failed. It would fail again. Verses 1 through 3. Verse 1. So, in the 9th year of Zedekiah's reign, on the 10th day of the 10th month, Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, marched against Jerusalem with his whole army. He encamped outside the city and built siege works all around it. The siege of Jerusalem likely began on January 15, 588 BC, as the Babylonian king takes extreme action to squash the rebellion. What is described is the beginning of a siege against a walled city. The Babylonians were skilled at such warfare, and their abundant artwork celebrating successful sieges shows the pride they took in their cruel skill. The plan of a siege is simple: seal off the city from any outside source of food and water. Then wait until the defenders give up due to starvation. Deuteronomy chapter 28, verses 53 through 57, and Jeremiah chapter 19, verse 9, predicted that parents would eat their own children. This gruesome prediction came true. To begin the siege, the Babylonians built encircling siege works that include battering rams. Verses 2 through 3. The city was kept under siege until the 11th year of King Zedekiah. By the 9th day of the 4th month, the famine in the city had become so severe that there was no food for the people to eat. A siege of Jerusalem in 701 BC had failed, but this one does not. Jerusalem falls on the 9th day of the 4th month of Zedekiah's 11th year of reign, computed to be July 18, 586 BC. Thus, the siege takes a bit longer than 2.5 years before it succeeds. Sieges gradually weaken the defenders and their defenses. Starvation and dehydration are deadly, and we may wonder how Jerusalem could have held out for more than 30 months. Various factors contributed to the length of this siege. Previous kings of Judah had built cisterns for holding water supplies and had improved Jerusalem's defenses. Furthermore, Jerusalem may have had a source of water within its walls. But undoubtedly, the biggest contributing factor to the siege's length was that it was lifted temporarily in order for the besiegers to deal with the threat from the Egyptian army. This respite undoubtedly allowed food and supplies to be restocked. We should also not discount pure human resilience as another factor. verses 4 through 6. Verse 4. Then the city wall was broken through, and the whole army fled at night through the gate between the two walls near the king's garden. Though the Babylonians were surrounding the city, they fled toward the Arabah. The text of Jeremiah 52, 7 through 8 repeats the narrative we see here, while Jeremiah 39, 2 through 5 adds detail. The three narratives in general and the phrase the city wall was broken through in particular do not indicate that Zedekiah surrendered the city or otherwise capitulated. Instead, a violent breaching of a wall or gate is in view. Earlier, the prophet had warned that only two outcomes were possible. One, if Zedekiah surrendered to the Babylonians, then he and the city would be spared. But two, failure to surrender would result in the opposite. As the king and the whole army flee, they belatedly seems to realize that Jeremiah was right, and they know the fate that awaits them should they stay. A knowledge of Jerusalem topography helps us understand the escape route the defeated soldiers use. Valleys border Jerusalem to the east, the south, and to a lesser extent, the west. Such areas are virtually unusable for an attacking army wishing to launch a direct assault against the city. So an attack has to come from the north. And although the Babylonians were surrounding the city, the main strength of their force is undoubtedly located in that northerly direction. Indeed, the additional information in Jeremiah chapter 39, verse 3 regarding the middle gate indicates just that. Piecing together various texts reveals that the king's escape route was not quite the same as that of his soldiers. Although this text states that the soldiers flee at night through the gate between the two walls near the king's garden, it does not say that King Zedekiah did likewise. Excuse me. We find the king's escape route prophesied in Ezekiel chapter 12 and 12. He would exit via a hole dug through the wall. Presuming that the king would want to stay near his remaining soldiers, this hole is probably close to the gate near the king's garden. This serves to place the exit points at and near the fountain gate, which is at the extreme southeastern end of the city, near what came to be called the Pool of Siloam. Travel during the darkness of night was very difficult in a pre-industrial era. At the same time, the lack of light pollution from cities allowed the stars and moonlight to better illuminate the landscape. The defenders of Jerusalem thus likely had some light for sneaking through the thinly guarded section of the Babylonian lines. We speculate that the king and his entourage hoped to obscure their identities and so perhaps escape death or exile. Verse 5. But the Babylonian army pursued the king and overtook him in the plains of Jericho. All his soldiers were separated from him and scattered. The Babylonian army knows what they're doing, and their pursuit of the king ends successfully in the plains of Jericho. This area is also mentioned in Joshua 4:13 and 5 and 10. More commonly, however, the area is known as the plains of Moab, by or across from Jericho. It is located in the Jordan River Valley to the east of Jerusalem. The capture of Zedekiah in this area means that the king and others have traveled some 15 miles and negotiated an elevation drop of some 3,300 feet only to have their escape attempt foiled. The prophecies of Jeremiah 21 and 7, 32, 4 through 5, and Ezekiel 12 and 12 through 13 are thus fulfilled in this verse and in the next two verses. Verse 6, and he was captured. He was taken to the king of Babylon at Riblah, where sentence was pronounced on him. Riblah was a city that is well known to the residents of Judah. It is the very place where King Jehoahaz had been imprisoned by Pharaoh some 2 decades prior. The distance to be covered to get there is nearly 300 miles. Zedekiah has several days to ponder his fate and why he didn't learn from the result of Jehoiakim's rebellion. Verses 7 through 9. Verse 7. They killed the sons of Zedekiah before his eyes. Then they put out his eyes, bound him with bronze shackles, and took him to Babylon. The Babylonian king exacts a vicious and gruesome price for Zedekiah's disloyalty. Such punishments were to serve as vivid examples to others contemplating rebellion. Also executed are all those of high standing in Judah. Verse 8. On the 7th day of the 5th month, in the 19th year of Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, Nebuzaradan, commander of the imperial guard and official of the king of Babylon, came to Jerusalem. Our narrator now shifts from naming the year of Zedekiah's reign to naming that of the Babylonian king Nebuchadnezzar. Judah is vanquished. Babylon is utterly in charge. As historians correct or correlate the dates of the king's reigns, a month or less has passed since Jerusalem fell. Verse 9. He set fire to the temple of the Lord, the royal palace, and all the houses of Jerusalem. Every important building he burned down. Having made an example of Zedekiah, the Babylonians now make an example of the entire city of Jerusalem. The prophets had predicted this outcome. Amos chapter 2, verse 4 through 5, Micah chapter 3, verses 9 through 12, and the speaker in Psalm 74, verses 3 through 8, laments it. Thank you so much for listening. Stay safe and may God bless.